Hello, my name is Patrick Dooley. I'm a 77-year-old Vietnam veteran. I served with Company D, 1st of the 8th Cavalry, Republic of Vietnam from October of 1967 to October of 1968. I would like to share as a part of history with everyone that has gone largely ignored and that I was part of. It was called Operation Pegasus. And to give my viewers some understanding of the magnitude of this operation and the limited personal understanding that I had at the time, I will use some outside sources. My hope is to give them sufficient acknowledgement and thanks. As an infantry soldier, news from the world was extremely limited. We had no cell phones, landlines, pay phones. There were no newsstands, television, very limited radio access. We did receive the Stars and Stripes newspaper sporadically. Mail from home was your lifeline to the world. Most of the following information comes from the New York Times. Opinion: the enduring debate over Khe Sanh by Greg Jones. And there is the link to the piece. In early 1968, the siege of the Marine combat at Khe Sanh dominated the American news coverage. North Vietnamese Army's move against Khe Sanh was being compared to the Dien Bien Phu, the remote French garrison that was surrounded and forced to surrender. As 1968 started, both the United States and the North Vietnamese were looking for victory in the upcoming year. The Marine combat base at Khe Sanh became a prominent prize for both sides. Khe Sanh was a large U.S. Marine base 15 miles south of the DMZ, or the Demilitarized Zone, in the north part of the Quang Tri Province in South Vietnam. The base was home to approximately 6,000 troops. The base was approximately 7 miles from the Laotian border. In early 1968, the base came under attack from the North Vietnamese Army, the NVA. The base was built on a large plateau in which the hills surrounding it were higher. This goes against military principle of taking the high ground. Two North Vietnamese Army divisions, some 20,000 men, arrived from the west in January of 1968. This came to the attention of General Westmoreland, who thought it would be good because he had plans for an unprecedented artillery and air response that would cripple the North Vietnamese Army. On Sunday, January 21st, in the early morning, the NVA initiated a series of attacks in which they penetrated the perimeter of the Marine outpost on Hill 861 before failing. The NVA also bombarded the Khe Sanh combat base with artillery, which detonated the main ammunition dump. The base and its outposts came under daily barrages and sniper fire for the next 2 weeks. There were growing concerns of a massive ground assault on Khe Sanh, especially after the urban attacks on January 31st. The next day, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Earl Wheeler, asked General Westmoreland whether tactical nuclear weapons might be required to save Khe Sanh. Westmoreland hedged his bets. In a worst-case scenario, he said, I visualize that either tactical nuclear weapons or chemical agents would be active candidates for employment. February 5th, fighting continued in Saigon Way and other cities. The NVA attacked a key Khe Sanh outpost, Hill 861 Alpha. The North Vietnamese forces pierced the perimeter but were repelled by a large artillery barrage, followed by a counterattack. February 6th, the Army Special Forces camp was overrun in a ground assault supported by 11 Russian-made PT-76 light tanks. I recall the story of Lang Vey from a website they had. Langvay was a special forces camp located 7 miles from Khe Sanh on the Laotian border. The original site for the camp was abandoned when they realized it was lower than the surrounding hills. They built a new base on a higher hill. They also built a bunker underneath the main bunker, which figures prominently in their story. The captain of the base knew something was up a few days before the attack. The daily patrols started to receive contact, and the base had mortar rounds in the perimeter. The big tell came when a large group of civilians came down the road from Laos. I believe the base housed around 500, although most of that number were locals hired to help. At night on the 6th of February, the NV attacked the base. Tanks at the wire. The base had two 50 caliber machine guns and an old recoilless rifle. They had no way to defend the base. A group of defenders, realizing their predicament, ran down to the bottom of the hill. The captain and a number of others got into the bunker below the command bunker. They could hear the tanks running over them. The enemy discovered a vent shaft and dropped satchel charges down it. The captain called in for a strike on top of their position, which is called a broken arrow. From their account, when the shelling stopped, they ran out to find that the enemy had a 50 caliber machine gun in their path. The story went that the first man out saw it and eliminated it. The group made it to the bottom of the hill where they were eventually extracted. The captain was worried for the Khe Sanh Marine Base because they were only 7 miles away and tanks could cover that distance quickly, especially on a road. They systematically began attacking the Marines on the hills surrounding the base and overrunning their outposts. They encircled the base with trenches and concealed gun positions. This eventually led to the base to be under siege. The New York Times article states that the siege reached a climax in the last week of February 1968, but this didn't become evident at the time. Operation Sierra, which was launched on February 24th to inundate the enemy gun positions with tear gas, smoke, high explosives, and napalm. This allowed the big C-night helicopters to swoop in and drop netted supplies to the outpost. On the 25th of February, a Marine patrol was devastated and trenches were discovered within a few yards of the perimeter. The NVA undertook 3 waves of attacks on the 29th. The Americans activated an elaborate plan of B-52 and artillery strikes to stop the attack as a few enemy soldiers reached the perimeter. The pressure on the base eased as the weather improved in March. The Army Marine Relief Force arrived, and on the 8th of April, the commanders called an end to the 77-day siege. A similar description is included in Ken Burns' documentary of Vietnam, except I believe there was a reference to the 1st Hill Cavalry. I'll leave the Times article, but do expect to cite it further statistical information later on. The military and political implications of the U.S. having a base being overrun and defeated by the North Vietnamese army became a possibility. A plan was needed to avoid such a catastrophic outcome. And I hope to bring you General John Tolson's synopsis of the Operation Pegasus in a future video. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope everybody will share it and become subscribers and followers, and thank you so very much.